Hello and welcome to Beyond the Classroom with Mr. Macy. Today's lesson, Poetics, Understanding Rhyme. So what is rhyme? This is an idea that we grow up with from the first time we hear The Cat in the Hat by Dr. Seuss when we were very young. Yet the definition in and of itself of rhyme can be rather challenging. A good basic definition could be a linkage, mostly in poetry, of final syllables wherein medial vowel and terminal consonant sounds are identical. Now, if that seems complex, remember what you first noticed when you were a small child hearing Dr. Seuss. In terms of rhyme, sounds begin differently but end similarly or in fact identically. To once again highlight just how rich and complex of a subject rhyme is in and of itself, the main source that I used in compiling this video, the Princeton Encyclopedia of Poetry and Poetics, has an entry whose definition alone runs over a page. You may ask yourself, what is it that rhyme does? What is its function? It is mostly, although certainly not entirely, about form. In terms of form, rhyme helps to establish equivalence and compound meaning. What does establish equivalence means? Well, by rhyming, poets will often be able to connect one thing to another, such as in famous schoolyard taunts, a very famous one poetically coming from John Crow Ransom, who rhymed the name of Percy Bysshe Shelley, the great British 19th century poet, to jelly, rhyming Shelley and jelly. So if you think of schoolyard taunts, take that, poet greater than John Crow Ransom. You can see establishing equivalence very directly. In terms of compounding meaning, we'll turn to T.S. Eliot, a poem that we're going to use heavily in this video, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, in the following example. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent. You notice that argument and intent rhyme, and they show us something about the streets that we may not have noticed or may not have been highlighted otherwise. Rhyme also helps to organize metrical shape and poetic form, such as in an example we are going to get to in just a second. And our final point also helps to provide powerful mnemonics, which we're also going to highlight in just a second. So first, the example. From John Keats' Ode on a Grecian Urn. Thou still unravished bride of quietness, thou foster child of silence and slow time, sylvan historian who canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme. You notice in these first lines from Ode on a Grecian Urn, the words in red rhyme and the words in blue rhyme. This helps to already establish in the very first lines of the poem the metrical shape and poetic form. It is established right away that this is going to be in iambic pentameter, and the larger stanza from which this is taken is already given something of its total rhyme scheme. So, that is an example there of how rhyme can be used to help establish metrical shape and poetic form. Now, in terms of providing powerful mnemonics, while in our example there is certainly some challenging vocabulary that John Keats is using, it is actually very easy to memorize a more complex piece like Ode on a Grecian Urn that uses rhyme because of that rhyme. In fact, this has been a tool that has been used for literally hundreds upon hundreds of years by poets and playwrights. Shakespeare, in fact, used this tool, used rhyme, to let people know by placing a rhyming couplet very often at the ending of scenes that the scene was in fact over. So that was kind of a cue to people, hey, this scene is over, we are moving on to our next scene. So a quick tip, if you have something that you have to memorize quickly, try rhyme. It has been a tool that has been very successful for literally hundreds upon hundreds of years. So what types of rhyme are there? We'll start out with what people traditionally mean when they say rhyme. For instance, masculine rhyme, where the terminal or final syllables rhyme. In our example from Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? You notice that dress and digress rhyme. Feminine rhyme, where the final two syllables rhyme, such as in this example. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. One of the reasons I selected this example was because it shows the mastery that Eliot had even as a young poet in using rhyme. You notice he's using multiple words to form the feminine rhyme here, which shows just how great he was when it came to his ability to use rhyme even as a very young poet. Last but not least, we have triple rhyme, where the final 3 syllables rhyme. Now, this has mostly been used since the time of George Gordon, Lord Byron, for comedic effect, such as in the following example from Ogden Nash, one of my favorite examples of triple rhyme in the 20th century, The Llama. The poem goes like this. The 1L llama, he's a priest. The 2L llama, he's a beast. And I will bet a silk pajama that there is no 3L llama. So, obvious comedic effect there. Ogden Nash, the llama, using triple rhyme. Now, the rest of the examples of rhyme, you will have some purists say are not exactly rhyme. However, they are generally considered part of rhyme or falling under what you would call the rhyme umbrella, such as sight rhyme. If you look at the example, bow and tough certainly do not rhyme, but they would appear to rhyme. This is one of the reasons why it is under the general umbrella of rhyme. Another example would be slant rhyme or near rhyme, such as in Our American Master with this, and one of the all-time greats in using slant or near rhyme, Emily Dickinson. I've known her from an ample nation, choose one, then close the valves of her attention, like stone. You notice that one and stone do not exactly rhyme. However, the effect that is achieved is that when we would expect rhyme, we are drawn in a little bit more by this slight difference, and it can draw our attention in a way that highlights something about the rhyme that we would not have otherwise have noticed. What other types of rhyme? When you are looking within poetry or verse play, you will commonly see 2 types of rhyme, end rhyme, and this occurs when the ending of one line rhymes with another, regardless of the poetic form. So, such as the John Keats example with Ode on a Grecian Urn, or a very simple AABB rhyme scheme that you might see when you're reading poetry very early on in school. There's also internal rhyme, and this occurs when a word in the middle of a line rhymes with either a word at the end of a line or a word in the middle of another line. So 2 quick examples to show each. Example 1, very famous example from Poe's The Raven. While I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. You notice that napping, tapping, rapping, all rhyme. Example 2 from Shakespeare's Macbeth. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire, burn, and cauldron bubble. So 2 examples there to highlight the 2 different uses as described of internal rhyme. So we have a number of related terms, and they are your sound devices. Some of my favorites here at the top: assonance, time scythe from Shakespeare, one of my favorite uses of assonance. Consonance, ironic rainbow from Lowell. Bob Dylan, alliteration, it's all over now, baby blue. For the following 2, reverse rhyme and frame rhyme, it was easier to simply select examples that were in the Princeton Encyclopedia of Poetry and Poetics. So reverse rhyme, you notice that this is not what you would normally think of as rhyme, once again included under the umbrella of rhyme. Bat and back most certainly would not appear to rhyme, but if you look at them in reverse, they then rhyme. This is truly a term. There's also frame rhyme, also known as para-rhyme, where everything but the vowel would add up to a rhyme, such as back and buck. Well, I hope you enjoyed this, and if you are in fact interested in learning a little bit more about rhyme or seeing some masters use rhyme, I might recommend the following pieces to you. John Keats' Ode on a Nightingale. I gave you the first quatrain out of Ode on a Grecian Urn, or I should say the very first 4 lines out of Ode on a Grecian Urn, because the stanza is longer than 4 lines. Ode on a Nightingale is one of my favorite masterpieces from the 19th century. I highly recommend it. T.S. Eliot, The Naming of Cats, from Old Possum's book of Practical Cats. I am a huge fan of how Eliot uses rhyme, and this is one of my favorite poems to read to my cat, so I highly recommend if you have a cat, read it to your cat. E. Cummings, anyone lived in a pretty how town. Cummings was certainly a formal master, and he has always been a perennial favorite since he was a living poet. Last but not least, one of the all-time greats, Miss Emily Dickinson. My life had stood a loaded gun. Certainly one of the all-time greats in poetry and one of the all-time great users of poetic form, certainly including rhyme. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.